Don't pick it up. The thought came too late, because Naomi Carter's fingers had already closed around the vibrating phone on the polished glass table. Its screen blank, no caller ID, no missed calls, just a pulse that felt almost deliberate, like it was waiting for her. And the moment she lifted it to her ear, the ringing stopped, not cut off, not declined, stopped, replaced by a low static hum that filled the silence of the empty conference room. A room she wasn't supposed to be in, not at this hour, not on this floor, not as the daughter of a night cleaner who knew how to move without being seen. But tonight something had been off from the start. The elevators too quiet, the hallway lights flickering just slightly out of sync, and now this. A call that wasn't a call at all, just listening. Naomi held her breath, the scent of disinfectant still clinging to her sleeves, the faint echo of her sneakers on marble floors lingering in her ears. And then it came, a voice, male, calm, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't rush because it never had to. She's not supposed to survive this. Naomi's spine stiffened, her grip tightening instinctively, her eyes flicking toward the door even though she knew no one was there. The building had been nearly empty when she and her mother started their shift 2 hours ago, just security downstairs and a few late executives who kept to themselves. But this voice, it didn't belong to the night. It belonged to power, to daylight meetings and closed doors. Another voice followed, quieter, uncertain. What about your wife? And for a moment, everything seemed to pause. The hum of the overhead lights, the distant whir of the HVAC system, even Naomi's own breathing. And then the first voice returned, just as steady, just as cold. She signed it. She knew the risk. Naomi swallowed hard, her gaze drifting slowly across the room until it landed on the far wall, where a framed photograph hung beneath a soft spotlight. A man in a tailored suit, silver at the temples, standing beside a woman with a composed smile, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Richard Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, a man whose name was printed on every badge in the building, whose presence was felt even when he wasn't there. Naomi had seen him once, from a distance, stepping out of a black SUV, surrounded by people who never spoke unless he looked at them first, and now his voice was in her hand. The realization hit not like a crash, but like a slow tightening, a quiet certainty that settled in her chest and refused to move. Naomi lowered the phone slightly, staring at it as if it might change, but the line was still open, the static still whispering. And then, faintly, footsteps echoed from somewhere down the hall. Measured, approaching, not hurried, but not casual either. Security maybe, or someone who knew this floor wasn't supposed to be occupied. Naomi's heart began to pound, not loud, but deep, like a drum she couldn't silence. She should hang up, put the phone back, walk out, pretend none of this ever happened. But her fingers didn't move, because something about that last sentence, she signed it, kept replaying in her mind. And as the footsteps grew closer, the line crackled again, just for a second. Just enough for a third voice to slip through, softer, almost fragile, and unmistakably female, whispering something so quiet Naomi almost missed it, except she didn't, because it wasn't just a word, it was a name. And it was hers. Naomi did not move at first because her name did not feel real coming through that line. It felt misplaced, like hearing your reflection speak before you did. And for a second, she wondered if she had imagined it, if the hum of the building and the pressure in her ears had twisted the sound into something familiar. But then it came again, softer this time, barely a breath. Naomi. And the way it lingered was not accidental. It was directed, intentional, like whoever said it knew exactly who was holding the phone. Her chest tightened as she slowly raised the receiver back to her ear, her fingers trembling just enough to make the plastic creak. The hallway outside the glass walls stretched long and empty, but the footsteps were closer now, steady, measured, each one echoing faintly against the polished floor. She had seconds at most, maybe less. The smart choice would have been to hang up and walk away, to become invisible again, to let this moment pass like everything else she was never supposed to be part of. But something inside her refused to let go. Not fear, not curiosity, something deeper, something that felt like recognition. The female voice returned, clearer now, though still low, as if pressed through layers of distance. If you can hear me, do not hang up. Naomi's breath caught, her eyes darting once more to the photograph on the wall. The woman beside Richard Hale. The same calm smile. The same composed posture. And suddenly that image did not feel like decoration anymore. It felt like a clue, like a warning she had walked past 100 times without seeing. "Who is this?" Naomi whispered, her voice barely more than air, but the line reacted. A slight shift in the static, a pause that felt like someone choosing their next words carefully. "You are not supposed to be there," the woman said, ignoring the question entirely. And that was when Naomi understood this was not a random connection. This was not interference or coincidence. This was something reaching her, through a system she did not understand. At a moment that felt too precise to ignore, the footsteps outside slowed, then stopped completely. Just beyond the door, a shadow moved across the frosted glass, and Naomi's heart began to race faster now, louder, each beat pressing against her ribs like a warning. "They are looking for you." The voice continued, still calm, still controlled, but there was something beneath it now. Urgency, not panic, but pressure, like time was narrowing. Naomi swallowed hard, forcing herself to think, forcing herself to stay still. "Why do you know my name?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. And for the first time, the woman hesitated, not long, just enough to make the silence feel heavy. And then she answered, "Because you picked up when I could not hang up." Naomi frowned slightly, the words not making sense at first, but before she could ask again, the handle on the conference room door shifted slightly. A faint metallic click that cut through the air like a signal. The person outside was about to come in. Naomi's grip tightened around the phone, her mind racing through options that all felt too slow, too late. "Listen carefully," the woman said, her voice now sharper, more focused. "Everything he told them is not the truth." Naomi's eyes flicked back to the photograph, to Richard Hale's face frozen in that controlled smile. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. Not fear, not confusion, but clarity, the kind that comes when a line has already been crossed and there is no way back. The door began to open, just an inch, just enough for light to spill in from the hallway. And as Naomi stood there, caught between leaving and staying, the voice in her ear spoke one last time, quiet but certain. "If you walk away now, you disappear again, and this time, no one will hear you either." The door opened just enough for a slice of light to cut across the table, thin and sharp, landing right beside Naomi's hand. And she did not look up because if she did, it would be over too quickly. The illusion of being unseen would break, and whatever this moment was, whatever it was turning into, would collapse before she understood it. So instead she held the phone closer, her voice low but steady. "Then tell me the truth." The room stayed still for half a second, just long enough for the silence to feel deliberate, and then the woman on the line exhaled softly, not tired, not afraid, but like someone who had been waiting for that exact sentence. "The truth is not hidden," she said. "It is just placed where no one thinks to look." Naomi's eyes flicked instinctively to the table, to the reflection of the overhead lights stretching across the glass surface, then to the folders neatly stacked at the far end, untouched, labeled, precise. Everything in this room was intentional, nothing left by accident, which meant the phone in her hand had not been forgotten. It had been left. The realization settled quietly, not as panic, but as something colder, more focused, and just beyond the glass wall, the figure in the hallway shifted, a silhouette now visible through the frosted panel, tall, composed, not rushing, the kind of presence that did not need to hurry because it expected the world to wait. Naomi's breath slowed, her grip steadied. "Why me?" she asked, her voice almost lost under the hum of the lights, and this time the answer came without hesitation. "Because you were never meant to be in this room, which means you are the only one who can see it clearly." Naomi frowned slightly, the words cutting deeper than they sounded, because she understood them, not fully, but enough. She had spent years moving through spaces like this without being acknowledged, watching conversations from the edges, noticing what others overlooked, because no one ever thought to hide anything from someone they did not see. The woman continued, her tone shifting, more precise now. "Look at the second folder from the left." Naomi's eyes moved immediately, landing on a dark blue file. Its corner aligned perfectly with the edge of the table, untouched like the rest, but now it felt different, heavier, like it carried something more than paper. Do not open it yet, the voice added quickly, as Naomi's fingers instinctively twitched. Just remember where it is. The handle on the door moved again, this time further, the gap widening, the light stretching across the floor, and Naomi could feel the moment closing in, tightening around her choices. You are running out of time, the woman said, not as a warning, but as a fact, and Naomi finally lifted her gaze toward the door, toward the figure stepping inside, a man in a dark suit, posture straight, expression unreadable, his eyes scanning the room with quiet authority before settling on her, not surprised, not confused, just aware, and in that instant, Naomi understood something else, something the voice had not needed to say. This was not about being caught. This was about being seen, truly seen, for the first time in a place that had always treated her like part of the background. The man took a single step forward, his voice calm, controlled. That phone does not belong to you. Naomi did not answer, her heart still steady, her mind sharper now than it had ever been. And in her ear, the woman spoke one last time, softer now, almost fading. If you want the truth, do not follow his rules. And then the line went silent, completely silent, no static, no breath, nothing, as if it had never been there at all. And Naomi stood in the center of the room, the phone still in her hand, the folder still untouched, and for the first time, she realized she was no longer deciding whether to leave. She was deciding who she was willing to become. Naomi did not lower the phone even after the line went dead, because silence had already proven it could speak, and the man standing a few feet away watched her with a patience that felt practiced, like he had been in rooms like this many times before, rooms where people hesitated, where decisions stretched longer than they should. His eyes moved briefly from her face to the device in her hand, and then back again, measuring, calculating, but not rushing. I asked you a question, he said, his voice even, not loud, not threatening, just firm enough to establish that he expected an answer. Naomi let a second pass before responding, just enough to reclaim something invisible. It was ringing, she said, her tone calm, almost neutral, and she placed the phone gently back on the table, not sliding it, not dropping it, but setting it down with care, as if the way she moved mattered now. The man stepped closer, his shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor, his gaze shifting briefly toward the folders at the far end, then back to her again. And you decided to answer it, he replied, not as a question, more like a conclusion. Naomi nodded once, slow, controlled. No one else did, she said, and something in that sentence lingered between them, something subtle but sharp, because it was not just about the call. It was about everything else that went unanswered in places like this. The man studied her for a moment longer, then exhaled quietly, not annoyed, not impressed, just thoughtful. You are not assigned to this floor, he said, his tone shifting slightly. More procedural now. Your badge would not grant you access. Here, Naomi's eyes flicked once to the door behind him, still partially open, then back to his face. The elevator stopped here, she answered, not entirely untrue, not entirely complete either. And for a brief second, the man's expression changed, not enough for most people to notice, but Naomi saw it. A flicker of something beneath the surface, something that suggested he knew more than he was saying, or expected more than he was showing. The overhead lights hummed softly above them, steady, indifferent, and Naomi became aware of the blue folder again, without looking directly at it. Its presence now louder than anything else in the room, like a second conversation happening just beneath the first. You should return to your assigned duties, the man continued, stepping slightly to the side, opening a clear path toward the door, not blocking her, not forcing her, just guiding, as if the outcome had already been decided and he was simply allowing her to follow it. Naomi shifted her weight slightly, her hand brushing the edge of the table as she moved, her fingers passing within inches of the folder, and for a moment, time felt stretched, like the air itself was waiting to see what she would do. Her heart beat once, twice, steady, controlled, and then she turned, not toward the door, but toward the far end of the table, her hand closing around the blue folder before the man could react, not fast, not aggressive, just certain, like she had already made the decision seconds ago. The man's posture changed immediately, not stepping forward, but tightening, his voice losing its softness. "That does not belong to you." Naomi held the folder firmly now, its weight heavier than she expected, her eyes meeting his directly for the first time without hesitation. "Neither did the call," she said quietly, and the words settled into the room with a weight that matched the silence that followed. The man did not respond right away, his gaze fixed on her, sharper now, more focused, as if reassessing everything in front of him. And somewhere deep in the building, a faint mechanical sound echoed through the walls, distant but deliberate, like something had just been set in motion. Naomi felt it more than she heard it. A shift, subtle but undeniable. And for the first time since she stepped into that room, she understood that whatever this was, it had already begun long before she picked up the phone. The folder felt colder than it should have, like it had been waiting in that exact spot for longer than the rest of the room, and Naomi held it steady against her side, not opening it yet, not even glancing down, because she could feel the man watching her more closely now, his posture no longer neutral, his presence sharper, more defined. "You are making a mistake," he said quietly, and this time there was no softness left in his tone, just control, the kind that expected obedience without raising its voice. Naomi did not step back, did not shift her weight. She simply stood there, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the folder as the words settled in the space between them. "That depends," she replied, her voice calm but firmer now, "on who decides what the mistake is." The man's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in anger, but in calculation, as if he was adjusting to a version of her he had not anticipated, someone who did not follow the usual script, someone who did not lower her gaze or apologize for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, steady and indifferent, and for a brief second, neither of them moved, the silence stretching, thickening, until the man reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out a small device, sleek, black, his thumb hovering over the screen. "If you leave now," he said, glancing down at it briefly before looking back at her, "this does not have to become anything more than a misunderstanding." Naomi's eyes flicked once to the device, then back to his face, and she understood the offer for what it was, not a favor, not protection, but containment, a chance to fold the moment back into silence before it spread. "And if I do not?" she asked, her voice steady, and the man did not answer right away, his silence more telling than any words, because it confirmed what she already felt, that this room, this call, this folder, none of it was accidental, and whatever she was holding had weight beyond paper, beyond policy, something that reached into decisions made far above her pay grade, far beyond her job description. The faint mechanical hum from earlier returned, slightly louder now, like systems shifting behind the walls, unseen but active. Naomi took a slow breath, the air cool in her lungs, and then she moved, not toward the door, but toward the glass wall, just enough to see the reflection of the room behind her, the man standing still, the table perfectly arranged, the phone resting exactly where she had placed it, and herself, centered, holding something she was never meant to touch. She looked at her own reflection for a moment, really looked, and for the first time, she did not see someone passing through. She saw someone standing still, choosing. The woman's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "Do not follow his rules." Naomi turned back, meeting the man's gaze directly. "Then it is already more than a misunderstanding," she said, and before he could respond, before he could step closer or press whatever button waited beneath his thumb, she opened the folder, not fast, not hesitant, just deliberate. The pages inside crisp, organized, lines of text and numbers aligned with precision. But what caught her was not the format. It was the heading, bold, centered, unmistakable, a name she recognized instantly. Evelyn Hale. Naomi's breath slowed as her eyes moved across the first page, absorbing just enough to understand what she was looking at without needing every detail, agreements, signatures, dates, all structured to look clean, legitimate, controlled. And yet something beneath it felt wrong, not in what was written, but in what was missing, like a story told without its ending. The man took a step forward now, his voice lower, more urgent. "Close it," he said, not loudly, but firmly, and Naomi did not move right away, her eyes still on the page, her mind connecting pieces she did not even realize she had collected. The call, the voice, the sentence she signed it. And then, almost without thinking, she flipped to the last page. And that was when her hand paused, not from fear, but from recognition, because the signature at the bottom was there, clear, precise, but just above it, in a space that should have been empty, there was something else, something faint, almost invisible unless you knew to look, a second mark, a line that did not belong. And in that quiet moment, Naomi understood that the truth had never been hidden. It had simply been layered, waiting for someone who was not supposed to see it to finally look closely enough. Naomi did not blink as her eyes stayed fixed on that faint second mark, because once she saw it, she could not unsee it. It was not part of the printed document, not aligned, not clean, just slightly off, like something added after everything else had already been finalized. Her fingers traced the edge of the page without touching the mark itself, careful, controlled. And behind her, the man's voice came again, sharper now. Close. The folder, but this time it sounded different, not just controlled, but strained, like something underneath was beginning to surface. Naomi turned her head slightly, not fully facing him yet, her gaze still partially on the document. "This is not complete," she said quietly, and the words hung in the air longer than expected, because they were not a question. They were an observation. The man stepped closer, one measured step, then another, his shoes making a soft, deliberate sound against the floor. "You are not qualified to interpret what you are looking at," he replied, his tone returning to that practiced calm. But Naomi shook her head once, slow, deliberate. "I do not need to interpret it," she said, finally lifting her eyes to meet his. "I just need to see what does not belong." And for a brief second, something shifted in his expression. Subtle, almost invisible, but real. The kind of reaction that only happens when control slips by a fraction. Naomi lowered her gaze again, flipping the page back slightly, aligning the edge under the overhead light. And that was when she noticed something else. The paper itself was different near the bottom, thinner, almost layered, as if a second sheet had been pressed against it at some point and then removed, leaving behind a ghost of pressure, an impression that did not match the rest of the page. Her breath slowed, her focus narrowing, and without thinking, she tilted the page just slightly toward the light, the reflection shifting across the surface, revealing faint indentations, not visible head-on, but undeniable at an angle, writing that had once been there, removed, but not completely erased. Naomi's heart beat once, firm, steady, and she whispered almost to herself, "There was something here." The man did not respond immediately, and that silence told her more than any denial could have, because if there had been nothing, he would have said so, quickly, firmly. But instead, he watched, waiting, calculating, deciding his next move. The hum in the walls grew slightly louder, like distant machinery adjusting its rhythm, and Naomi became aware again of the phone behind her, sitting exactly where she had placed it, quiet now, but not irrelevant, never irrelevant. The woman's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "The truth is not hidden. It is placed where no one thinks to look." Naomi's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the folder, and then she did something simple, something small, but irreversible. She slid her hand beneath the last page and lifted it just enough to separate it from the rest, creating space between the layers. And as she did, a faint line of text revealed itself along the inner edge, not printed, not formatted, but pressed, as if written on a sheet that had once rested above it. Her eyes moved quickly, reading what little she could make out. Fragmented words, incomplete, but enough. Authorization, conditional, not executed. Her chest tightened, not in fear, but in clarity, because the meaning was there even without the full sentence. Whatever had been signed, whatever had been agreed to, it had not been completed the way it was presented. It had been altered, framed, controlled, and suddenly the voice from the call returned in full. She signed it. She knew the risk. Naomi lowered the page slowly, her gaze lifting again, this time fully meeting the man's eyes, steady, unwavering. "She did not finish this," she said, and this time, there was no softness in her tone, no hesitation, just certainty. And for the first time since he entered the room, the man did not respond at all, not immediately, not even with a deflection. He simply stood there, his eyes fixed on her, and in that silence, Naomi realized. Something else, something even more important than what was written in the folder. The truth was not just in the document. It was in who was trying to keep it closed. And as the faint mechanical sound in the building shifted again, deeper now, more deliberate, Naomi understood that whatever she had just uncovered was not meant to stay hidden anymore. It was meant to be found. Just not by someone like her. The silence that followed her words did not feel empty. It felt loaded, like something had shifted just enough to reveal what had always been underneath. And Naomi did not look away from him because she knew this moment mattered more than anything written on the page. The man's gaze stayed locked on hers, steady, controlled, but no longer dismissive. Not anymore. Now there was recognition there, not of who she was, but of what she had seen, and that changed everything. "You are stepping into something you do not understand," he said finally, his voice quieter now, lower, as if the room itself was listening. Naomi closed the folder slowly, not hiding it, just sealing the moment, her fingers pressing lightly against the cover as if to keep the truth inside from slipping back out. "Then explain it," she replied, her tone even, not confrontational, just direct, and for a second, it almost sounded simple. Like a conversation that could still be turned back into something normal, something controlled. But the man did not answer. Not right away. His eyes shifted briefly past her, toward the phone on the table, and that single glance told Naomi more than anything he could have said, because it confirmed what she already felt, that the call had not been an accident, that the voice on the line had not reached her by chance, and more importantly, that he knew it. "Who else heard it?" he asked suddenly, his attention snapping back to her, sharper now. Focused, Naomi did not hesitate. "No one," she said, and it was the truth, but not the full truth. Not anymore, because hearing was not just about sound, it was about understanding, and she had already crossed that line. The man studied her for a moment longer, as if weighing the answer, then nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Good," he said, and that single word carried more meaning than it should have. Not relief, not approval, but containment. Again, the same quiet effort to keep everything inside this room, inside this moment, where it could still be managed, controlled. Naomi's grip tightened slightly on the folder, and she felt the faint indentation beneath her fingers again, the hidden line, the incomplete truth, and suddenly the room felt smaller, not physically, but in what it allowed, what it expected, what it assumed she would do next. She did not finish signing, Naomi said, her voice cutting through the space before she could stop herself. And this time, the reaction was immediate, not loud, not dramatic, but real. The man's posture shifted, just slightly, his shoulders tightening, his jaw setting for a fraction of a second before returning to that composed stillness. "You are misreading a partial document," he replied, but the words came too quickly, too precise, like they had been used before, like they belonged to a script rather than a response. Naomi shook her head once, her eyes steady. "No," she said, quietly. "I am reading what was left behind." And the difference between those two things settled into the air, heavy, undeniable, because one was about control and the other was about truth. The hum in the walls deepened again, more noticeable now, like something larger was shifting beyond the room, beyond the floor. Naomi's mind moved quickly, connecting pieces she had not even realized she had collected: the call, the voice, the folder, the missing line. And then something else surfaced, something she had not questioned before, the woman's voice saying her name, not asking, not guessing, knowing. "Why did she say my name?" Naomi asked suddenly, and this time, she did not look at the folder, she looked directly at him, because this question was different. It was not about documents or signatures. It was about intention, about connection, about why her. And for the first time, the man hesitated, not long, but enough for Naomi to see it clearly. The calculation, the adjustment, the realization that this was no longer just about what she had taken, but about what she had understood. "You are asking the wrong questions," he said finally, but his voice had changed, not weaker, not louder, just less certain. And that was all Naomi needed, because in that small shift, she saw the truth more clearly than anything written on paper. This was not just about a document that had been altered. This was about a story that had been controlled, a version of events that had been decided before anyone else could see it. And the moment she picked up that phone, she had stepped into the part they never planned for, the part where someone who was not supposed to matter started asking the one question they could not fully answer. And as Naomi stood there, holding the folder that was never meant for her, she realized something that changed everything again. She was not just uncovering the truth. She was interrupting it. The room did not feel the same anymore. Not after what had been said, not after what had been seen, and Naomi could sense it in the way the man shifted his weight ever so slightly, in the way his eyes no longer dismissed her as an inconvenience, but tracked her as a variable, something that needed to be managed, something that could not be ignored. And she understood that shift because she had spent years being overlooked, which meant she knew exactly what it felt like when that invisibility disappeared. Interrupting something does not mean you understand it, he said, his voice measured again, but thinner now, stretched just enough to reveal the strain beneath. Naomi did not respond right away, her gaze drifting for a fraction of a second toward the phone resting on the table, still silent, still ordinary. Yet nothing about it felt ordinary anymore, because it had already done what it was meant to do. It had connected her to something beyond this room, beyond this version of events, and that realization settled into her chest with a quiet certainty. She knew I would pick it up, Naomi said, more to herself than to him. But the words landed between them anyway, and this time, the man did not hide his reaction completely. A brief tightening at the corner of his eyes, a pause that came a fraction too late. And that was all Naomi needed. You are assigning intention where there is none, he replied, but his voice did not carry the same weight it had before, not after that moment, not after that slip. Naomi shook her head slowly, her fingers pressing lightly against the folder again, grounding herself in something physical, something real. No, she said, her tone quiet but unwavering. I am recognizing a pattern. And she took a small step to the side, not away from him, but around the table, changing the angle, changing the space between them, because she understood now that this was not about standing still and reacting. This was about moving first, about seeing before being told where to look. The hum in the walls deepened again, a low vibration that seemed to travel through the floor, subtle but constant, like something larger was aligning itself behind the scenes, and Naomi felt it, not as fear, but as pressure, as momentum building in a direction she could not yet see. The call, the folder, the missing line. She continued, her voice steady as her thoughts sharpened. None of it was random. The man's jaw tightened briefly, then relaxed, his posture straightening again as if resetting itself. You are connecting unrelated details, he said, but the words felt rehearsed now, not convincing, not even to him. Naomi stopped moving, positioning herself just enough so that the reflection in the glass wall behind him aligned with the photograph on the far side. Both images visible at once, his figure overlapping with Richard Hale's image in the reflection, and for a moment, it felt like she was looking at two versions of the same control, the same structure, just at different levels. Then explain why her name is here, Naomi said, lifting the folder slightly, not opening it again, just enough to emphasize its weight. And why her voice is not supposed to exist. The words settled into the room with a quiet force. And this time, the man did not respond immediately, his silence longer now, more deliberate, because there was no simple answer left, no easy way to redirect what had already been uncovered. And Naomi felt something shift again, not in him, but in herself, a clarity that settled deeper than before. She was no longer reacting to what was happening. She was shaping it, guiding it. And that realization changed the way she stood, the way she looked at him, the way she held the space between them. You said I was asking the wrong questions, she continued, her voice calm, controlled. So here is the right one. She paused just long enough for the silence to tighten again, for the moment to sharpen. Why is she still trying to be heard? And that question did not just land, it lingered. It pressed. It demanded something more than deflection. And for the first time since he entered the room, the man looked away, just for a second, just enough to confirm what Naomi already knew. This was never about a misunderstanding. It was about a truth that had not stayed buried the way it was supposed to. And as the faint vibration in the building deepened once more, almost like a distant signal being received, Naomi realized that whatever had started with a single phone call was no longer contained within this room. It was moving, expanding, and she was already part of it whether she chose to be or not. The question did not echo. It settled, like it had found the place it was always meant to land, and the man standing across from her did not answer right away, not because he did not hear it, but because there was no clean way to respond without unraveling something he had been carefully holding together. His eyes shifted again, not to the phone this time, not to the folder, but to the glass wall behind Naomi, where reflections layered over each other, the room, the table, the framed photograph, and for a brief moment, it felt like he was not looking at her directly, but at the version of the situation he could still control. "You are assuming she wants to be heard," he said finally, his voice quieter now, more deliberate, as if each word was being placed instead of spoken. Naomi tilted her head slightly, not confused, but focused, because that sentence did not dismiss her question, it redirected it, and that meant something. "Then why does her voice keep reaching me?" Naomi asked, her tone steady. And this time she did not soften the question. She let it stand exactly as it was. The man exhaled slowly, his posture adjusting again, not retreating, but recalibrating. "You are not the intended recipient," he replied, and the answer came too precisely, too clean, like it had been decided long before she asked. Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the folder, the edge pressing into her palm, grounding her, and she shook her head once. "That is not how it works," she said quietly. "You do not accidentally say someone's name." And that was when something changed, not in the room, not in the sound, but in him, because this time, he did not correct her, did not redirect. He simply watched her, his eyes narrowing just enough to acknowledge that she had moved past the surface, that she was no longer reacting to what she was told, but to what she understood. The low vibration in the building deepened again, more noticeable now, almost rhythmic, like a signal repeating itself somewhere out of sight. Naomi became aware of it in the soles of her shoes, in the faint tremor, beneath the stillness, and suddenly the room did not feel isolated anymore. It felt connected, like part of something larger that was already in motion. She did not hang up. "Naomi said," her voice softer now, but more certain. "That is what she said." And she looked directly at him, watching for the smallest reaction, and she saw it. A pause, a fraction of a second where his expression lost its structure, just enough to confirm what she needed. "That is not possible," he replied, but the words lacked the certainty they carried before, and Naomi took a small step forward, closing the distance slightly, not aggressively, just enough to shift the balance again. "Then why are you not denying it?" she asked, and that question did not leave space for a simple answer, because denial would require confidence, and confidence was no longer intact. The man's hand lowered slightly, the device he held no longer raised, no longer ready. And in that subtle movement, Naomi saw something she had not seen before: hesitation, not fear, not uncertainty, but a pause in control, the kind that happens when a system encounters something it was not designed to handle. And that was when it became clear to her. This was not just about Evelyn Hale, not just about a document or a call. This was about a structure that depended on silence, on things staying where they were placed, on people not asking questions they were not meant to ask. And the moment she picked up that phone, she had disrupted that balance. "You said I am not supposed to be here," Naomi continued, her voice steady, almost quiet. "But I am here." She let the words sit, not as defiance, but as fact, and then she added, "And she is still speaking." The hum beneath the floor deepened again, more pronounced now, and for a moment, both of them felt it, not just as sound, but as something shifting beyond the room, and the man's gaze hardened slightly, not with anger, but with decision, as if he had reached a point where waiting was no longer an option. "If you walk out of this room with that folder," he said slowly, his voice regaining its structure, its control, "you will not understand what you are carrying." Naomi held his gaze, unflinching now, her grip steady, her posture unchanged. "I already do," she replied quietly, and for the first time the silence that followed did not feel controlled. It felt uncertain, like something had slipped beyond reach, and neither of them could pull it back the same way again. The words lingered between them longer than expected, not because they were loud, but because they could not be undone, and Naomi could feel it in the way the room held its breath, in the way the man's gaze did not shift this time, did not attempt to redirect, or soften, but instead stayed fixed on her with a new kind of attention. One that measured consequence rather than control. Understanding is not the same as knowing, he said slowly, his voice steady again, but heavier now, like each word carried more than it used to. Naomi did not answer immediately, her eyes lowering briefly to the folder in her hands, not to read it again, but to feel it, to register its weight, because it was no longer just paper, it was a point of no return, and when she lifted her gaze again, something in her expression had changed, not defiance, not fear, but clarity. "Then tell me what I do not know," she said, her tone even, and for a moment, it almost sounded like an invitation, like there was still a version of this that could be explained, but the man did not take it, his silence, stretching just long enough to confirm what she already suspected, that whatever truth existed here was not meant to be given. It was meant to be controlled. The low vibration beneath the floor deepened again, more pronounced now, almost like a pulse moving through the structure of the building, and Naomi felt it more clearly this time, not just in her feet, but in the air itself, like something was aligning beyond their view. "There are systems in place you are not aware of," he said finally, his voice quieter, more deliberate, decisions that extend beyond a single document, beyond a single voice. Naomi listened, not interrupting, not reacting, because she understood this was not an explanation, it was a warning disguised as one. "And once you step into that," he continued, "you do not get to step back out." Naomi's fingers tightened slightly on the folder, her mind moving quickly, not through fear, but through connection, the call, the voice, the missing line, the way everything pointed not to an accident, but to a design, something structured, something layered. She already stepped into it, Naomi said quietly, and the words did not ask for confirmation. They stated it. The man's eyes flickered, just once, and that was enough. "And now she cannot leave," Naomi added, her voice softer, but sharper in meaning, and the silence that followed was different this time, not controlled, not measured, but exposed, because it held something real, something neither of them could fully reshape. The man exhaled slowly, his posture shifting again, not retreating, but adjusting to a reality that was no longer as contained as it had been moments ago. "You are assuming she is still part of this," he said, but the statement lacked force, lacked the certainty it needed to dismiss her. Naomi shook her head, her gaze steady, unwavering. "She said she could not hang up," she replied. "That means she is still connected." The hum beneath the floor deepened again, more insistent now, like a signal repeating itself, and Naomi felt a quiet certainty settle into her chest. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable, because everything pointed to the same conclusion. This was not over, not for Evelyn, not for the truth, and not for her. "You asked me to leave," Naomi said, her voice calm, almost reflective now. "But if I walk out, nothing changes." She let the words sit, then added, "And if I stay, it already has." The man watched her closely, his expression tightening slightly, as if measuring the weight of that statement. And for the first time, he did not try to correct her, did not try to redirect, because there was nothing left to simplify, nothing left to contain in the same way. "You are choosing to carry something you cannot control," he said, his tone quieter now, not a command, not even a warning, just a fact. Naomi held his gaze, her grip steady, her posture unchanged. "No," she replied softly. "I am choosing not to ignore it." And that distinction settled into the space between them with a quiet finality, because ignoring was what had kept everything in place before, what had allowed the truth to be layered, hidden, controlled, and the moment she chose otherwise, the system shifted, not visibly, not immediately, but undeniably, and as the low vibration beneath them pulsed once more, deeper, stronger, Naomi realized something that changed the meaning of everything that had happened so far. She had not just uncovered the truth, she had triggered it, and whatever came next was already moving toward her whether she stepped forward or not. The vibration beneath the floor did not fade this time. It stayed, low and steady, like something had locked into place somewhere deep inside the building. And Naomi could feel it in her chest now, not just under her feet, like a second rhythm trying to match her own. And the man noticed it too, not the sound itself, but the way she reacted to it, the way her focus did not break, did not scatter, but sharpened instead. "You think this is about a moment," he said, his voice quieter now, less controlled, more real. "It is not." Naomi did not look away, her grip on the folder firm but not tense, as if she had already accepted the weight of it. "No," she replied softly. "It is about what the moment reveals." And that distinction settled deeper than anything else they had said so far, because it shifted the entire frame. This was no longer about the call, or the document, or even Evelyn Hale. It was about what those things exposed when someone finally paid attention. The man's jaw tightened slightly, his eyes narrowing just enough to signal a decision forming. "You are not the first person to notice something does not add up," he said. And for the first time, there was something different in his tone, not authority, not dismissal, but something closer to warning. Naomi tilted her head slightly, her expression unchanged, but her attention sharpened instantly. "But you are the first one who did not look away," he continued. And that sentence landed differently, heavier, because it was not meant to intimidate. It was meant to define her position in something larger than this room. Naomi felt the truth of it settle in her chest, not as fear, but as confirmation, because she understood exactly what he meant. It was not about intelligence or access or power. It was about choice, about the moment where someone decides whether to continue or to step back into silence. And she had already crossed that line. "Then what happened to the others?" Naomi asked, her voice calm, steady, not pressing, just asking. And the man did not answer immediately, his gaze drifting again, not to the door, not to the phone, but to the reflection in the glass, where the room appeared duplicated, layered, slightly distorted. "They returned to where they belonged," he said finally, and the words sounded simple. But Naomi heard what was missing, what was not said, what had been removed from that explanation, just like the line in the document, where they were placed back. She replied quietly, and the man did not correct her, not this time. The silence that followed stretched longer, heavier, until the low hum beneath them shifted again, rising just slightly, like a signal reaching a new phase. Naomi's eyes flicked briefly toward the ceiling, then back to him. "This is not just inside this room," she said, more certain now. "It is connected to something else." And the man exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering just a fraction, not in defeat, but in recognition that the conversation had moved beyond containment. "You are beginning to understand," he said, and there was no denial left in that sentence, no attempt to redirect, just acknowledgement, and that changed everything, because it confirmed that the truth was not something she had imagined or pieced together incorrectly. It was real, structured, deliberate. "Then say it," Naomi said, her voice quiet but firm. "Say what this is." And for the first time, the man hesitated in a way that could not be hidden, not masked by control or posture, because saying it would mean defining it, and defining it would mean it could no longer remain abstract, contained, distant. The vibration beneath them pulsed again, stronger now, and Naomi felt it clearly, like something was responding to the moment itself. And then, slowly, the man spoke. "It is a system designed to prevent certain outcomes from becoming visible." Naomi's eyes did not move. Her expression did not change, but inside, everything aligned. The call, the voice, the document, the missing line, the way Evelyn's presence had been reduced to something controlled, something edited. "And she is part of that," Naomi said, not asking, and the man nodded once, barely, but enough. "She was," he corrected quietly, and that single word shifted the meaning again, because it implied a change, something incomplete, something unresolved. Naomi's grip tightened slightly on the folder, her mind moving quickly. "But she is still speaking," she said, and the man's eyes met hers again, steady, serious. "Then something has gone wrong," he replied, and that was the first honest answer he had given her. Not controlled, not shaped, just real. And in that moment, Naomi understood the full weight of what she was holding, not just a document, not just a secret, but a break in something that was never supposed to break. And as the low vibration beneath them deepened once more, steady and undeniable, she realized that whatever had gone wrong was not stopping. It was continuing, and she was already part of what came next. "Something has gone wrong." The words did not just stay in the air. They settled into Naomi's chest with a weight that felt different from everything before. because this was no longer about uncovering a hidden truth. It was about stepping into something that was actively breaking, and the man standing in front of her knew it. She could see it in the way his posture no longer reset, in the way his eyes stayed fixed on her without calculation, without distance, just awareness. "Then fix it," Naomi said quietly, and the simplicity of those words contrasted sharply with everything else in the room, because nothing about this felt simple anymore. The man let out a slow breath, his gaze shifting briefly toward the phone again, then back to her. "That is not how this works," he replied, but there was no resistance in his voice, no attempt to push her back, just a statement of structure, of limitation. Naomi shook her head slightly, her fingers tightening around the folder. "No," she said. "That is how it used to work." And that distinction landed deeper than anything else, because it acknowledged something neither of them had said out loud yet, that whatever system he was part of, whatever structure, had kept everything controlled. It was no longer functioning the way it was designed to. The low vibration beneath the floor pulsed again, stronger now, more present, like a signal growing clearer instead of fading. Naomi felt it in her chest, in her breath, in the space between each second. And then something changed, not in the room, but in the sound. A faint click echoed from somewhere behind the walls, subtle but distinct, followed by a brief flicker in the overhead lights, just enough to shift the shadows across the glass. The man's head turned slightly, just for a moment, his attention drawn to it. And that was all Naomi needed, not to escape, not to move away, but to move forward. She stepped past him, not rushing, not hesitating, just continuing, the folder still in her hand, her path no longer uncertain, the door to the hallway still open, the light beyond it steady. Waiting, the man did not stop her, not immediately, because he understood what she had just done. She had chosen direction over hesitation, and that was something the system was not built to anticipate. "If you leave that room," he said behind her, his voice returning, steady but quieter now, "you become visible in ways you cannot control." Naomi paused at the threshold, just for a second, not turning back yet, because she understood what he meant. Visibility was not safety. It was exposure. It was consequence. It was everything she had avoided her entire life by staying unnoticed, by staying in the background. But she also understood something else now. Invisibility had never protected the truth. It had only hidden it. She turned slightly, just enough to look back at him over her shoulder, her expression calm, grounded. "I was already invisible," she said softly, and that sentence carried more than just her presence in that room. It carried everything that had led her there, every moment of being overlooked, every time she had been expected to move quietly, to not ask questions, to not see what was right in front of her. The man held her gaze, and for the first time, there was no attempt to stop her, no attempt to redirect, just a quiet recognition of what she had chosen. The lights flickered again, slightly longer this time, and the hum beneath the building deepened into something more defined, almost like a pattern, a signal repeating itself with purpose. Naomi stepped into the hallway, the air cooler, the space wider, but it did not feel like leaving. It felt like entering something else entirely, something that extended beyond walls and floors, something that had already begun moving the moment she picked up that phone. And as she took another step forward, the sound followed her, steady, present, undeniable. And then, just as she reached the center of the hallway, the silence shifted again, not from the room behind her, but from somewhere ahead. And this time, it was not the man's voice that broke it. It was the same one she had heard before, clearer now, closer, no longer distant or fading. And it spoke her name again, Naomi. The voice did not echo this time. It did not come through static or distance. It came from ahead of her, clear, grounded, as if it had finally found the space where it belonged. And Naomi stopped mid-step, her breath catching not in fear, but in recognition, because this was no longer something reaching through interference. This was presence, real and undeniable. The hallway stretched long under the cold ceiling lights, reflections running along the polished floor, empty at first glance, but not empty anymore, not to her. The low vibration beneath her feet pulsed again, stronger now, aligning with the sound of her name, and slowly, without rushing, she lifted her gaze forward, toward the far end of the corridor where the glass walls met the corner. And there, just beyond the reflection of light and shadow, stood a figure, still, composed, not distant, not hidden. Just there, Naomi's grip on the folder tightened slightly, her heartbeat steady but deeper now, as if her body had already accepted what her mind was still catching up to. The woman did not move immediately. She did not call out again. She simply stood, watching, her presence quiet but firm, like someone who had waited long enough to be seen. And Naomi took a step forward, then another, each one measured, grounded, the space between them closing not quickly, but with intention. The hum of the building settled into a steady rhythm now, no longer shifting, no longer uncertain, as if something had finally locked into place. "You heard me," the woman said softly, her voice the same, unmistakable, but without distortion, without distance. Naomi nodded once, her eyes never leaving her. "You said my name," she replied, her voice calm, not questioning, just stating what had already been established. The woman's expression did not change, but something in her eyes softened, not relief, not surprise, but acknowledgement. "I needed someone who would not ignore it," she said. And the simplicity of that sentence carried everything that had led to this moment. Naomi exhaled slowly, her shoulders settling as the weight of the folder in her hand seemed to shift, not heavier, but clearer. "They said you were part of a system," Naomi said, her voice quieter now, more focused, "something that controls what is seen." The woman tilted her head slightly, considering the words, not rejecting them, but refining them. "It does not control truth," she said gently. "It controls who is allowed to recognize it." Naomi's eyes flicked briefly to the glass wall beside them, catching both their reflections side by side, one that had been framed and contained, and one that had stepped beyond it. And in that reflection, the difference became undeniable, not in power, not in status, but in choice. "Then why me?" Naomi asked again. But this time the question was different, not uncertain, not searching, but grounded in everything she had already seen. The woman's gaze held hers, steady, clear. "Because you were never part of it," she answered, and that truth settled deeper than anything else, because it explained everything: the invisibility, the distance, the way Naomi had moved through spaces without being accounted for, without being considered part of the system that controlled perception, and because of that, she could see what others could not. "They will not let this continue," Naomi said quietly, her mind already moving forward, already understanding the implications of what she had stepped into. The woman did not look away, did not hesitate. "They already tried," she replied, and the calm in her voice carried something stronger than resistance. It carried endurance. Naomi felt the weight of that settle in her chest, not as fear, but as clarity, because this was no longer about uncovering something hidden. It was about what happened next, about what she chose to do with what she now understood. The low hum beneath them steadied completely, no longer shifting, no longer building, just present, constant. And in that stillness, Naomi realized something that changed everything again. She had not been pulled into this by accident. She had been positioned by everything that made her invisible before, and now, standing in the open hallway, no longer unseen, no longer uncertain, she understood the full truth of what the voice had meant from the beginning. The call was never meant to be answered. It was meant to be continued, and she was the one who did not hang up.